Nuevamente, bienvenidos a todas las personas
Welcome again to everyone who is connected to our web seminar organized by the International Energy Agency, jointly with the Energy Ministry from Mexico and the National Commission for the Efficient Use of Energy. If you can go to the next slide, please. So, before we start, as you know, we have interpretation in Zoom. Mr. Moderator, presentation will be in English and you can hear it in Spanish. You can select the interpretation using the globe-like icon. Next slide, please. We would also love to see your questions and comments during the session, so please share through the chat with us in Spanish or English. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a short time for a Q&A session, and then we'll be answering at the end of the session. Next, please. Today's webinar is divided in 3 parts. First, we'll have a welcome words from SENER and the International Agency, and then we'll have a presentation of the recent analysis from the agency on how governments are giving of energy efficiency a key element on stimulus packages after COVID. Now I want to give the word for the welcoming words. Next slide, please. So we have Engineer Eberto Barrios, responsible of everything involving planning and energy transition from SENER. And I want to greet the Ministry of Energy for their support to organize this webinar. We also have the words from Brian Motherway from Energy Efficiency of the International Agency. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here with you and to see the great interest everyone has on energy transition, because this is very relevant. I also want to greet you on behalf of our Ministry of Energy, Rocío Nale Garcia. I want to thank the Ministry of Energy and Ana Lepure, Jack Miller, who were in charge of organizing this event. And also thank you to Ryan Motherway, Direct Head of Energy Efficiency, who is going to share the global view, who is very relevant on this topic. I also want to thank the people from CONUE, Mr. Odon de Buen and his team, who are honoring us with being here with us. Today is a very special day, October 21st, because as we were mentioning, we are celebrating the International Day on Energy Saving. And as we know, this concept led to energy efficiency and invite us to reflect on a rational and efficient use of energy. So that's why I invite you to make the responsible use of energy not a choice, but rather an obligation. Most part of my life, I've been working on energy efficiency and energy savings, and it is key for our government policies as well. I hope that all the information received today will be very useful for our society. I hope us all a very successful day. Thank you very much for your welcoming words. Now I want to give the floor to Brian Motherway for his welcoming words. Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna, and Buenos dias, ladies and gentlemen. Deputy Minister Barrios, thank you very much for being with us, and it's a pleasure and an honor to share the stage and to co-host this event with you. Odon de Buen is an old friend, and it's a very great pleasure to see you again, and thank you, Anna, also for moderating our session today. It's a great pleasure to be among so many friends and colleagues and stakeholders in Mexico and the region, even though it's some time since we have met in person. But I do want to take this opportunity to welcome everybody joining us today to the first joint webinar between IEA and SENER of 2021. But in fact, not at all our first joint webinar, because we've had a long series of really positive and enjoyable collaborations involving IEA, SENER and Conaway for many years now. And in fact, our series of joint webinars since 2014 has reached an audience of well over 5,000 people. And I'm pleased to say we're adding another 500 people to that audience today. We're very pleased to have you all joining us. And as the Deputy Minister said, particularly to have you joining us on Energy Saving Day 2021. We really appreciate the relationship with Mexico, with SENER in particular, with Conaway, and with all the stakeholders. And we do plan that this is going to be part of a continuing series of webinars, and we will have some more events in the coming months and years, working closely with our friends in SENER and in Conaway, reaching out to government at the federal and local level and to all the stakeholders to talk about these important energy efficiency issues. And of course, it's a very important time for energy efficiency as we come towards the big event in COP in Glasgow in just a few weeks' time, as we see many global debates ranging from climate change to energy prices to the future of energy transitions. And we in the IEA just recently have published our World Energy Outlook 2021, which really shows that a new global energy economy is starting to emerge as we look at the changing nature of investment, technology, and policies related to energy policy around the world. And in fact, in just a few weeks' time, we will also publish our IEA Energy Efficiency Market Report 2021 edition, which will bring you the latest insights in current trends in energy demand and efficiency and explore some key issues. And I will be giving you a preview and a special insight into some of those issues in the seminar today. Governments face really many pressures at the moment, including relating to energy and economy, and they seek to find ways to address the really deep challenges created by COVID-19 and also to prepare a path to economic recovery, as well as addressing energy policy issues, energy security, social and economic development, and of course, climate change. We in the IEA believe that energy efficiency has a special place in this, because as you will see in my presentation, we see that energy efficiency can meet many societal and economic needs, ranging from job creation to emissions reduction, as well as economic development and well-being. So we really encourage governments to think about the place of energy efficiency in the landscape of their energy and economic policies. And we are keen to work with all governments, including our very good friends in Mexico, to understand what best practice is, what kind of policies are available, and how to bring the benefits of energy efficiency to all the citizens of all countries. So Deputy Minister Barrios, I highly appreciate that we're working so closely with all of your team in SENER, as well as in Conaway and across Mexico and indeed the region. And I'm very grateful that you're joining us here today for this event, and very grateful that we're able to co-host this event. And with those opening remarks, I will now move on to my presentation to talk about our latest insights from the IEA, from our global analysis on energy efficiency, particularly in the context of recovery from COVID-19. So, first of all, let me start with our opening position from the IEA's perspective. Energy efficiency is really essential for economic, social, and environmental reasons. It can create local and sustainable jobs, and it can do so quickly. It can help make energy systems and societies as a whole more resilient. It can support goals around decent housing, health, well-being, affordable energy, affordable cooling. It can improve air quality in cities and beyond. And of course, we know that it's key to meeting both climate change objectives and sustainable development goals. And these will be the themes of my presentation today. But let me start with a recap of where we are today in late 2021. First of all, If we look at global CO2 emissions over the last few decades, we see that with the ups and downs of CO2 emissions, we saw a very dramatic drop in emissions in 2020 for all the wrong reasons. The kind of pain that societies went through in 2020 in terms of loss of life and well-being, economic trauma, all of the difficulties we all faced, it's not the way to reduce emissions. We need much more intelligent policies for that. And what's worrying us here at the IEA is that even now in 2021, as parts of the world start to see themselves recovering, certainly from current waves of COVID-19, we see a very, very strong bounce back of CO2 emissions. In fact, one of the single biggest growth years for CO2 emissions in recent history, which is obviously very worrying for many reasons. What's driving that bounce back? Well, of course, it's economic recovery, because after the dips of 2020, we see that global GDP will rise again in 2021, which is good for many reasons. And of course, energy demand will rise also. This is leading, as I say, to a big step in CO2 emissions, which is not at all in line with global ambition to rapidly reduce global emissions from global energy systems. We see in recent years as well that renewable energy is growing, and 2021 will bring some good news in the form of record growth for renewable energy. But on the other hand, we see also strong growth in coal use and in other fossil fuels. So we see a mixed story in this point we're at in 2021, where we have seen some good news, but a lot of worrying signs as well. In the domain of energy efficiency, we saw that 2020 was a weak year for progress in energy efficiency. If we measure it as energy intensity improvement, in other words, how much more GDP value we extract from our energy use, we see that generally in the past few years, we have been improving by about 2% every year. We saw a much slower improvement for many reasons in 2020, including the fact that economies shifted towards more intensive activities, that energy use in many sectors changed in very many ways very quickly. But we see some recovery from that. We're expecting better improvement in 2021 of almost 2% improvement in energy intensity. This is some good news, but not nearly as much as we know energy efficiency can improve and needs to improve if we're to deliver on our wider goals relating to economic well-being and of course climate change. We see similar trends in relation to investment in clean energy. We do see an upward trend that the total amount of global investment in clean energy is growing, but it's growing quite slowly. You can see that energy efficiency remains a key element of this, and I'll talk a bit more about that. And we see other areas attracting growing levels of clean energy. But again, my message in so many places will be, we see some signs of progress, but not nearly as fast as we would like to see. And certainly clean energy investment is a very good example of that. So this is why we have been working with governments to really understand the concept of sustainable recovery, where we can link economic recovery from the perturbations of the last 2 years with the deep goals related to clean energy, energy efficiency, and clean energy transitions. And therefore, last year, during the crisis, we tried to focus government's attention and said, as you start to think about recovering your economies from COVID, think about the beneficial links between boosting your economy, creating jobs, and of course, setting us on a path towards more efficient, cleaner energy economies globally. And we published what we call the Sustainable Recovery Plan, which helped governments understand how all of these goals can be aligned in a positive and mutually beneficial way. One of the reasons for this, of course, is that clean energy transitions create jobs, and in particular, energy efficiency creates jobs. Energy efficiency is one of the domains that creates the most jobs per unit of investment across the entire energy system. And that's because we're talking about sectors related to construction, such as building new buildings or upgrading existing buildings. We're talking about building infrastructure. We're talking about energy efficiency in industry, all domains where job creation is possible, and large amounts of job creation is possible from energy efficiency. It's also spaces where job creation can be mobilized quickly. Some types of energy investment take several years to come to fruition and don't really reach their maturity in terms of their benefits and their job creation for some time. Energy efficiency is not like that in many spaces because it can be mobilized quickly. It can get people into well-paid, sustainable jobs relatively quickly. And that's why we certainly see a very strong alignment between economic stimulus, job creation, and energy efficiency. The more ambition we have for energy efficiency, the more jobs it can create. And this is a recent extract from our World Energy Outlook that looks at different scenarios that apply differently in different parts of the world in terms of current policies versus those countries that have set targets for net zero energy systems. And there, of course, are many spaces in between. And the point here is the higher the level of ambition for clean energy, and particularly for energy efficiency, the higher the number of jobs that can be created. And energy efficiency can create literally millions of jobs in the coming decade if it is a policy focus and if governments and private sector invest in energy efficiency. We have been tracking announcements in recent months and years by governments related to spending in the sphere of economic stimulus. We see some good news. We see some countries making quite strong announcements of large amounts of investment in clean energy, and particularly in energy efficiency linked to stimulus programs. For example, here in Europe, where there's a large stimulus program underway that has quite a strong focus on energy efficiency. We don't see this geographically evenly spread. Some parts of the world are better represented than others. So we do think there's plenty of potential for further a focus on linking government and private sector spend on stimulus related to energy efficiency and clean energy and energy efficiency goals. So we see a start maybe here of a journey where we see larger amounts of money being allocated by governments to energy efficiency because of their many benefits related to energy efficiency itself, but not least their job creation benefits. And we do think there's plenty of scope for more of that to happen in the coming years. As we analyze clean energy investment, particularly in the context of economic stimulus, last year we published some research where we looked at best practice, not just from recent years, but from the recent decades and previous areas where economic stimulus has been required and where large amounts of government investment has been targeted towards stimulus and job creation, and where there have been links to clean energy and energy efficiency in particular. There are some lessons to be learned, and I just summarized some of them here. You can read the research on our website for more detail, but we see that if governments want to succeed in linking economic stimulus to energy efficiency goals, they can learn from successes of the past in many parts of the world, and not least, of course, in Latin America and in Mexico itself. We see, for example, that the quickest way to mobilize larger scale activity is to leverage existing programs if there are existing incentives or regulations in place that can be scaled up, if there are existing technology lists or grant schemes, or even just the simple acts like application mechanisms or approved lists or things like that that can be used to quickly expand the scale of energy efficiency programs to deliver higher levels of stimulus. It's important to think about both the short and the long term in this kind of stimulus so that action can start quickly, but also the pipeline is being prepared for the projects that take longer to mobilize, the bigger, more expensive projects, the projects that need more planning or permitting, and to think about the various phases of action so that jobs can be created quickly, but they can be sustained over time. And that's how short-term impacts in terms of changing the way buildings are built or building new infrastructure can really turn into long-term transformations. Because during stimulus, of course, a lot is built. A lot of appliances are purchased, a lot of buildings are built, and these will lock in either inefficiency or efficiency for several decades. So the moment we're in here in 2021 is really a unique opportunity to lock in much greater levels of efficiency, which keeps energy bills down, which reduces energy imports and strengthens energy security, and of course, locks in lower levels of emissions in our infrastructure and in our energy using assets, ranging from cars and appliances to homes and offices and factories. There are a number of other dimensions of best practice that I won't go into, except to say that we in the IEA are really very strong believers in the value of international cooperation. And one thing we see as we work with countries around the world on energy efficiency is everybody has something to learn from everybody else. There's some really excellent policies and programs in Mexico that we have often highlighted to countries in other parts of the world so they can learn from them. And equally, I hope that Mexico can learn from practices going on and policies being implemented in other parts of the world. And we very much see ourselves in the IEA as working to help countries connect to each other and learn from each other so that all can benefit from each other's experience and deliver and implement better policies in the future. And no better time than now to really focus on how we can learn from each other and how we can collaborate regionally and globally to deliver the best outcomes. Let me turn now to a little look at some of the key opportunities in the key energy using sectors around the world. And let me start with one that I think really is among the most important, which is buildings. There's about 80 countries around the world have building codes in place, which mandate or suggest certain levels of energy performance for buildings being built, whether it's homes, offices, factories, all or some of those, excuse me. We see that building codes really do work, that new buildings built today, if they are built to high standards, use far less energy than existing buildings. In fact, in many parts of the world, a new home built today will use less than half of the energy of the average existing building. And this is because they are being driven by ever increasing standards, driven by codes and other policies that encourage or push builders and developers towards higher standards of building practice, better insulation, better appliances installed, all of the elements that make buildings more efficient. And we see that this really can grow, excuse me. We know that building codes and related policies have worked, and we know that they can continue to work. For those parts of the world with codes already in place, we see opportunities for those codes to continue to strengthen and reach higher levels of efficiency. For other parts of the world that are still developing codes, we encourage them to learn from other countries in terms of the opportunities of how to do this in ways that really works with industry, works with the building sectors, and ultimately benefits citizens and consumers who get to live in more comfortable, more healthy, and more affordable homes. And we know that these policies can work. One of the key technologies, of course, in homes is how we heat and cool the homes. And firstly, how we heat homes, we're in a certain transition in many parts of the world from using natural gas or different types of technology towards a real focus on heat pumps. And we think that even though it's still early, and in some cases, the technology is really only starting to be deployed, we're thinking in the coming years and decades, electric heat pumps will be a key technology right around the world, providing heat in homes and in offices, and even in some lower temperature applications in industry. So we see that heat pumps will be a key technology for deployment in the coming decades. Like many energy efficiency technologies, the technology already exists, it's cost effective, it's well understood. So the focus now is how to deploy it at mass scale, how to get more demand for its installation, more supply of the technology, how to bring costs down so that it becomes more affordable. And we see many countries with a policy focus on this technology, looking at incentives, regulation, also looking at elements such as training of installers, raising awareness about the benefits of heat pumps. And we think this is going to be a very important technology in the coming years. Similarly, cooling is a very important technology, not least because cooling is really essential to life in so many parts of the world. There are almost 3 billion people living in a zone where it is very, very hot every day. And yet in that zone of 3 billion people, less than 1 in 10 households currently owns an air conditioner. Air conditioning is, of course, not the only way to get the benefits of being cool, but it's a crucial one. And even more importantly, it's one that is growing very, very rapidly in terms of uptake, driven by a warming world, but also driven by a world where it's becoming more affordable to more people. So in some parts of the world, like Japan and the United States, almost every household has an air conditioner. In other parts of the world, including key growth areas such as Brazil, China, and India, and of course Mexico, current ownership rates are relatively low, but we expect them to grow very strongly in the coming decades. This is a good thing. Air conditioning makes people's lives better. It makes their homes healthier, makes them more comfortable, and it brings a benefit to people if it can be done in ways that is sustainable and affordable. At the same time, if everybody around the world starts buying and installing very inefficient, expensive air conditioners, it creates economic challenges and it creates energy system challenges and environmental challenges. And what's particularly interesting about air conditioning as a technology is, as we analyze it in detail globally, we see that there is a very wide range of air conditioners for sale in every market today, ranging from very inefficient to very efficient. And it is the nature of things, the nature of human behavior, the nature of markets, that most air conditioners being sold today right around the world are among the most inefficient available in their markets. You can see in this chart, if you look at the range of the blue bands, that most air conditioners being sold are at the bottom of the efficiency range, whereas the devices often literally 2 or 3 times more efficient available for sale. Of course, we understand there are many reasons why people don't tend to buy the most efficient devices. They're not always the most available. Sometimes they can cost more, or people can think they are going to cost more. And there are many reasons why people don't always buy the most efficient technologies. On the other hand, we know that policy can help here. Policy can make the more efficient devices more available and more affordable. And they can also bring scale to the market so that they become the normal devices, not the exceptional devices. There's a real opportunity here for governments to find ways that benefit the system as a whole, but also benefit individual consumers and families to make efficient devices more affordable and more accessible, so that not only can people afford to buy air conditioners, but they can afford to run them and keep their energy bills as low as possible. Of course, there's a major economic opportunity here as well globally, as we see the scale of the market for air conditioners grow right around the world, and as we see a thrust towards more efficient devices. Mexico is a very significant global player in terms of air conditioners and really has some great opportunities for exporting, particularly as we see more markets moving towards higher levels of efficiency standard. And we see many countries benefiting from their domestic markets, leading the way in becoming more efficient, both in what they sell in their own countries and what they sell internationally. And we see a real market trend here towards efficiency and an opportunity to accelerate it. And I would say that we in the IEA are working with many countries at the moment under a global initiative called SEED, which is a super energy efficient appliance deployment initiative, working with countries to see how they can all push towards higher levels of efficiency ambition in some key energy using appliances, including air conditioners, refrigerators, lighting, and motor systems. Those 4 technologies between them use almost half of the global electricity demand, and a real opportunity for efficiency gains in the short term. And we're very pleased to be working with many governments to think about how they can align their policies, align how they develop their efficiency standards and other related policy instruments to push towards higher levels of efficiency in ways that make appliances not only more affordable for people to buy, but much more affordable for people to run and to put power into, so that they benefit from better quality of life, more comfortable ways of living in more affordable and more sustainable ways. We know that these policies work because we have seen them around the world, and particularly when you look at countries who have a long track record of appliance efficiency policies. We just very recently published some new analysis that looks in a very deep way at all of the impacts of such policies over several decades in those countries that have been deploying these policies for the longest time. And we see that in places where there are long-running appliance policy programs, savings are very dramatic indeed. In many countries now, for example, that have had appliance policies in place for domestic devices like washing machines, refrigerators, and air conditioners, those devices are now using literally half the energy they would otherwise be using without those policies. And it's also very important to note that the that the appliances have not become more expensive. In fact, they've become cheaper. In the period where energy use by such appliances has been falling, driven by policy, the purchase price of such devices have also been falling by 2 or 3% a year. So it is possible with well-designed policy to meet many goals at the same time. You can make appliances cheaper to buy, you can make them more efficient and therefore more affordable and cheaper to run, and you can also build domestic sectors that can manufacture and export these technologies regionally and globally, creating many jobs and creating many wider economic and social benefits. It's a real success story of energy efficiency, and it's something we want to remind governments of, that there are still many opportunities for the deployment of these kind of energy efficiency policies to benefit people in the short term and of course in the longer term. If I turn now to the industry sector, I just want to give you an example of where we're working in this case with India to look at a key industrial sector for India, which is textiles. This is manufacture of cloth, weaving of cloth, manufacture of clothing. All in all, it is one of the biggest employment sectors in India, employing more than 45 million people, and very significantly, 60% of those are female. It's a huge economic component of the industrial sector in India, and in the past, it's not known for very high levels of energy efficiency. It suffers from the very classic problem of very large amounts of small operations where even though their energy bills may not be very significant on a case-by-case basis, add up to a really huge national energy bill and a really huge economic impact. We have been working with the government and with the sector in India to really understand where energy is used in the textile sector, what are the key technologies and industrial processes, and what are the opportunities for making them more efficient in cost-effective and beneficial ways. And we are now working with our partners in the Indian government to look at the kind of policies that can help really drive higher levels of efficiency that will make the sector more efficient, more sustainable, more competitive, and also reduce overall energy use, energy imports, and of course, related emissions. So it's just one of many examples where a real sectoral focus on industry can identify the opportunities in terms of the technologies and the practices that can become more efficient, and how policy can drive that kind of level of greater efficiency. Having talked about those sectors, I want to just in my remaining few minutes talk about a couple of really important cross-cutting issues that I think apply to all of this discussion related to energy efficiency and economic stimulus, and both of which will become much more important in the coming years. The first I want to mention is digitalization. We in the IEA believe that digital technology and the growth in the deployment of digital devices and digital systems is really going to transform energy systems, as it is already transforming our lives in many ways. We see a different future for energy efficiency, both in terms of the greater levels of control and optimization that is already becoming possible in the buildings around us, in our homes, in our cities, to control and optimize energy use, to give us better levels of access to data, better levels of analysis that can really make our energy use more efficient and more smart. But we also see an opportunity for a different way of thinking in energy efficiency that thinks in more systems terms, particularly as so many countries around the world grow their penetration of variable renewable resources such as solar and wind. And it starts to become really critical for energy grids and electricity grids in particular to optimize supply and demand in more dynamic and more fast-paced ways than was ever the case before. And that's when demand-side flexibility becomes really important, to make use of the clean, cheap, renewable resources when they're available, and to manage demand when those resources are less available. And we see this really emerging very quickly in many grids in many countries around the world. And the role of energy efficiency and the demand side flexibility is really expanding very, very quickly. And of course, that takes policy responses, and governments we encourage to look at the policy actions necessary to exploit these new opportunities to bring benefits to everybody. Just recently, we worked with the G20 group of countries, and we were asked by this year's G20 president, the government of Italy, to produce new analysis called Empowering Cities for a Net Zero Future, which looked particularly at the questions related to the urban environment and urban electricity systems, about how we can unlock the the power of digital technology to make urban environments, and particularly their electricity grids, more resilient, more smart, and more sustainable. And we looked at the kind of measures and actions that are already starting to emerge in terms of exploiting new technologies, bringing benefits to citizens, reducing pollution in cities, reducing the costs of infrastructure, and making energy systems more efficient and more sustainable. And this report, like all of the ones I'm referring to today, are available for free on the IEA website, and I would very much encourage you to look at them. The second cross-cutting issue I want to mention is possibly the most important of all, and that's a focus on people. We know that clean energy transitions and energy policy in general affects people's lives in very many ways every day. And we also know as well that these policies exist to benefit people. Our focus is on making people's lives more comfortable, making energy more affordable, and of course addressing wider questions such as energy security, energy access, and of course climate change. We encourage governments to think about how to make their clean energy policies and all of their energy policies more people-centered and more inclusive. And in this regard, earlier this year, our Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, convened the Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions that brings together 30 members from around the world, state leaders, energy and climate ministers, representatives of youth and labor, civil society. And of course, we're extremely honored and privileged that Energy Secretary Rocia Nale Garcia is one of our key members, and we're delighted and honored that Secretary Nale is one of our active and really engaged members in this process about talking and sharing experience about how we can learn from each other to understand how to make clean energy policies more people-centered and more inclusive. The members of the Commission, including Secretary Nale, have been meeting over the last few months virtually to discuss what are the key dimensions of when we talk about people-centered clean energy transitions. And they have identified 4 major themes. The first is how to create decent jobs and how to protect workers who may lose their jobs as sectors change over time. How to connect clean energy properly and fully with social and economic development, and to make sure that social and economic development is always to the fore of clean energy policies. How to make sure that all policies have a focus on equality, social inclusion, and fairness. And of course, how to see that people are fully active participants of clean energy transitions, whether it's accepting new policies, accepting infrastructure changes, or their own behaviors as energy consumers. The Global Commission have taken these themes and turned them into 12 very sharp action-oriented recommendations that they make to other ministers, to other governments, and to other decision makers as to how they can learn from experience and learn from global best practice to make clean energy policies of the future more inclusive and more people-centered. And next Tuesday, the 26th of October, we will have a live online meeting of the Global Commission starting at 9:30 Mexico time, which is 4:30 in the afternoon here in Paris. And everyone is welcome to join us online for the live streaming, which will be available in both English and Spanish. And you'll be able to download the recommendations of the Global Commission, as well as a brand new database of best practice examples that we have developed to support the work of the clean energy transition that will be available on the IEA website from next Tuesday. And we look forward to continuing that conversation with Mexico, with the Secretary, and with all of our friends and colleagues around the world on this very important issue. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that what I've spoken to you about today has given you a flavor of some of the many dimensions of energy efficiency and its alignment with economic development, with COVID recovery, and the opportunities we see for very strong alignment here. Energy efficiency is about policy. It works when policies are put in place and when they're delivered well. And we see many opportunities, not least in our friends in Mexico and in the region, where good policy leads to good outcomes. It leads to more affordable energy for citizens. It leads to lower levels of pollution, lower greenhouse gas emissions, better economic resilience, better energy security. We know that energy efficiency has worked around the world, but we know that we are really at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what it can do in the future. And therefore, we look forward to working with governments and stakeholders right around the world to continue the journey towards a more efficient and a more resilient and sustainable energy future. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Brian, for this remarkable presentation. Ahora pasaremos a una breve sesión de preguntas y respuestas que será moderada por el ingeniero Odón de Buen.
Moderator by Engineer Odon de Buen, head of CONUE,
Estamos muy agradecidos por el apoyo para la realización de
to whom we are very grateful also
micrófono.
for organizing this meeting. Odon de Buen, the floor is yours.
¿Me escuchan? Hola, hola.
Excelente, lo escuchamos muy bien.
Muy bien. Anoté aquí las preguntas.
Yes, we can hear you.
Brian Motherway. La saludo a usted
Mr.
también.
Braden Motherway, I want to greet you. Also, Anna,
Todos los que nos están viendo,
and anyone that who is here. I see that we have people from Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, Mexico, many different states, and from many other institutions. We have many questions that they asked through the chat, and I'm going to read the ones that have to do with Brian's presentation first.
Venezuela, José Solano. Venezuela GBC advisor. Regarding a post-COVID recovery and a true sustainable energy, will the IEA and other institutions such as the WGBC may come together and establish standards regarding the ethical commitment and disclosure for the life cycle sustainability of renewables such as solar power and the origin of the required minerals? Thank you. You have a Should I read, leo todas las preguntas? Should I read all the questions, Brian?
Let me take that first one, Odon. Would you just repeat the last part of the question again, please?
Yeah. May come together and establish standards regarding the ethical commitment and disclosure for the life cycle sustainability for renewables such as solar power and the origin of the required minerals. Thank you.
Thank you, Odon, and thank you for that very important question. And it speaks to a key point as we move in clean energy transitions, particularly as we move to a stronger focus on renewable energy. It raises a new set of questions, as the questioner has rightly pointed out, related to where do the materials come from that make those renewable technologies? Where do the materials for solar panels, for batteries in electric vehicles, et cetera, et cetera? And that, as rightly pointed out, raises social and ethical questions, it raises economic questions, and it potentially raises new types of security questions. Will we be swapping old questions of where our fossil fuels come from and the security of that to new questions of where our critical minerals come from and the security of that? So just recently, the IEA has published a new report on this topic on critical minerals, and it's a discussion that is very live with our governments right now. I can assure you that all of the governments we work with are very focused on this question, exactly as the questioner has asked, in terms of how to understand how we can globally collaborate to make sure that all of these issues are addressed in the context of our growing dependence on critical minerals. We very much believe these issues can be addressed by policy. Now that we know the path we are on, we can work together to put the right types of policies in place to address those questions, and it's certainly something that the IEA will be working with governments on in the future.
Muy bien, gracias, Brian. Pregunta de Luis Carlos Ordóñez.
Okay, thank you very much. Which kind of employment are we promoting with energy efficiency? Like in the Mexican South border and the North Triangle, like Honduras and El Salvador, which kind of jobs can we promote with energy efficiency to reduce migration?
So every country and every region can play to its strengths in terms of the kind of indigenous infrastructure, indigenous industry and skills and manufacturing base, what it's good at. I think one of the most cross-cutting ones I would mention is related to the construction sector, because energy efficiency is very focused on construction, and it's very good at employing local people and giving jobs to local communities, whether it's building new homes, whether it's upgrading factories and schools and offices, and it can work with local building practices and local ways of doing things, all pushing towards more energy efficiency. And of course, we know the construction sector employs a wide range of skill sets and a wide range of types of jobs. and it's very focused on creating local employment. So there will be many sectors around the world that will be different, many types of jobs that will be different, but I think that one that is a unique strength of energy efficiency is its ability to create lots of really good quality, sustainable jobs in many aspects of construction and building.
Gracias, Brian. Ahora, de Yamil Uribe.
Thank you, Ryan. Now, Jamil Uribe.
Energy efficiency to circular economy.
It's a really important point, and particularly as we look towards countries that want to move faster towards reducing their carbon emissions, we have to think beyond just the end use of energy in our materials, in our appliances, in our buildings, and we have to look at the wider question. And I think a very good example I would give is, let's say, the steel sector. So we know that economies around the world are dependent on steel, particularly growing economies, because it's so important for building infrastructure and buildings and vehicles and everything else. But we also know as well that the manufacture of steel is very energy intensive and very carbon intensive. And the technologies to reduce the carbon intensity of steel will come, but right now they're not ready. They're not fully developed at market scale, at economic scale. And therefore, as we look at how we can start to decarbonize the global steel sector, one really important dimension is looking outside the steel factory and looking at where we use steel in society, reducing the steel content of buildings, reducing the steel content of vehicles, but also making sure we're recycling that steel. Because one of the easiest steps to reduce the energy and emissions implications of steel is to move towards much greater levels of secondary production through recycled steel, through electric arc furnaces, direct arc furnaces, etc. So it's a really important area to think about the circular economy, as your questioner has asked, to think about the material dimensions, the recycling dimensions, and the use dimensions, as well as the energy itself.
Gracias, Brian. Un saludo de Manuel.
Thank you very much. Greetings from Manuel de Diego. This seminar is showing how committed the Mexican government is. So now I'm asking other questions that are from people from abroad. What's the main challenge on energy efficiency for Mexico from the IEA perspective?
I think the challenge that Mexico faces is the same challenge that every government faces, which is energy efficiency often sounds simple when I describe all the great things it can do. But as the Deputy Minister and as Odon de Buen know very well, it's challenging to implement it well because it involves a lot of actions. There are many dimensions across the economy. It involves a lot of policy, but also a lot of implementation. There are questions around skills and enforcement and quality. There are so many dimensions to the energy efficiency agenda, which my colleagues on the line know much better than me. So Mexico faces the same challenges, but I have seen some great results in Mexico. I've seen so many great actions working across SENER and Conaway and the other partners, and particularly working between federal government and the regions and local government about working hard together to focus on really delivering on the ground. Energy efficiency is about delivery on the ground. It's not just about theory. And I think every government faces that challenge to apply the policy resources and the manpower resources to really go from theory to practice on the ground. And that's always going to be a challenge. But I think energy efficiency proves it has the benefits and the positive impacts that make that investment of effort and time and money worth it in the end.
Gracias, Brian. Ahora
Thank you,
pregunta
Brian. And now Alberto Diaz is asking,
on the financing required to scale up energy efficiency through new technologies deployment in the developing world? That's the question, right?
Yes, financing is central to all parts of clean energy and not least energy efficiency. And certainly you can pitch this, Odon, as a challenge or an opportunity, because we would like to see global investment in energy efficiency go up twice or three times what it is today. But that is an opportunity because it's an opportunity for positive investment that creates economic growth, that creates jobs and makes people's lives more comfortable and makes energy more affordable. So there's a real opportunity here. But of course, energy efficiency often involves high levels of upfront capital investment that turn into benefits over many years. And there's a question of, can consumers, can governments, can countries, can the world afford that? I think there's a key issue for the world in the climate debate in particular now about financing, particularly in emerging and developing economies. I think there's a key, and rightly so, a key focus on accumulating capital to make sure that the investments happen where they need to be. We in the IEA always say very strongly that this is a global question. This is about global engagement. The addressing climate change is a global race where we either all win or we all lose. It's not about one country reaching the goal quicker than the other. And global collaboration, including on finance, is really important. The one good news for energy efficiency is, in our analysis, the vast majority of energy efficient investments available in the context of whether it's economic development, energy security, or climate change actually pay for themselves in very positive ways, because the initial investment is paid for by the savings in energy. So even compared to other clean energy investments, energy efficiency has a good business case to make, and hopefully this makes it more attractive to investors.
Gracias, Brian. Ahora de Archer.
Thank you very much, Brian. Now, Archer Mose.
Complete presentation about this important subject. Can you please elaborate on the innovative business models, please, Brian?
Sure. So we see many countries, and Mexico has many good examples of this, of where, if I relate it to my last question, often energy efficiency involves capital outlay at the front and savings over many years. And sometimes the consumer, whether it's in my home or in my business, in my textile factory, in my hospital, I cannot afford the capital outlays, even if I would benefit over the subsequent years from the savings. And that's one place where new business models have really helped, because third parties, often described as energy service companies or ESCOs, can step in, and they bring both the expertise and the capital to intervene in a way that benefits both parties. And there's often innovative contracting models around shared savings, energy performance contracting. This has worked to a certain degree, but there's lots of challenges around the level of information required, the transaction costs to set it up. And I think one thing that's very interesting, Odon, is how digitalization can really change these business models, because now monitoring energy performance, monitoring where the savings are, but also monitoring the performance of these business models over time. Where do the savings come? Were they caused by the energy efficiency upgrades? We can analyze much better the energy efficiency performance of upgrades and technologies, and therefore contracting them and financing them is going to become much more robust and much easier. So I see, in my view, we're at the dawning of a really interesting time for innovative business models, because they're made so much more possible by digital technologies.
Gracias, Brian. Aquí viene de pregunta de Juan.
Thank you very much. Now this question from Juan Guillermo.
IEA recommends in order to incentivize and promote energy efficiency in power sector, more specifically on thermal power plants. Do you consider some policies focused on retrofits or auxiliary energy demand reductions? What are the key policies to consider on thermal power sector? That's the question, Brian.
Thank you, Odon. This is a complicated question, of course, but it's a very pertinent question, so thank you for asking it. And we see different countries approaching this in different ways, often through market design and regulatory design. And as I said earlier, I think we see a new model emerging now to think about grids in much more dynamic ways, where the kind of efficiency you're talking about are incentivized by the remuneration structure in the market, by the kind of incentives and pricing structures that will reward the more efficient generators and encourage the less efficient ones to become more efficient. And particularly as we see them now competing, we see thermal power plants competing with renewable sources, with nuclear, and also with demand side flexibility. I think the incentives to be efficient are only going to grow in the coming years. And of course, this will be exacerbated in cases where there's also a focus on carbon and as well as that. So I see, again, things changing quite rapidly here, where the kind of policies to encourage thermal plants to become more efficient are starting to evolve quite quickly, as we see new models of electricity grid emerging as variable renewables grow in their penetration.
Gracias, Brian. Estoy respondiendo las que tienen que ver con lo
Thank you very much. I'm first asking the questions that have to do with the international overview. And then if we have time, I will go with Konue.
impactful action a government can take to promote greater energy efficiency? That's the question, Brian.
I think I would say look to Sinair and look to Conaway. There are so many good examples of policies going on, the kind of actions that are being taken. And I want to commend the government of Mexico in all its forms for the great work it's doing on energy efficiency. And it's showing, whether it's in appliance policy, in buildings policy, in industry, that there are great potential gains. I would certainly encourage the government to consider what further actions can be taken, and we would be very happy to work with the government. And I see many types of policies that are already in place have more to give, as they do in every country. And I see new policy types emerging related to digitalization, related to new technologies that will also become part of the mix. As I said earlier, we have gone on a strong journey of energy efficiency in Mexico and in many countries, but there is really plenty of scope ahead of us on that journey to do a lot more as well.
Gracias, Brian. Ahora de Omar
Thank you
Macera.
very much, Brian. Now, Omar Macera.
Goals, we need to assure that improvements in energy efficiency actually lead to a reduction in aggregate energy consumption, i.e. a small rebound effect at best. What actions is taking IEA in these regards?
So governments pursue energy efficiency policies for different reasons, and sometimes it's to make energy more affordable, sometimes it's to support economic development, sometimes it's to reduce energy import, to reduce emissions. It's not always the first goal of energy efficiency policies to reduce energy demand, and I don't think we should see it as necessary. For many countries, particularly emerging and developing countries, growth in energy demand is going to happen and is going to be a good thing, because it implies more people getting access to energy, energy becoming more affordable and bringing benefits to people's lives. The question is, how is that done in economic and environmental terms? Can we reduce the carbon emissions? Can we reduce air pollution? Can we reduce energy demand to a certain degree? But I must say, in my view, a certain amount of rebound from energy efficiency is not a bad thing if it means people are accessing more affordable energy, new jobs are being created, new economic activity is being created. But of course, it's very important that governments understand that, so that they're still meeting their bigger goals in terms of energy demand, emissions, and related things. We see in policy design that there are ways of making sure that we maximize the benefits of people in ways that don't rebound into negative impacts. But I think it really depends on the goals of the policies in each case. And we need to keep a focus on why we're doing energy efficiency. We're doing it for economic and social and environmental reasons, and the exact mixture of those reasons will determine the kind of policies and the kind of outcomes we're looking for.
Gracias. Esta pregunta viene de Costa Rica, de Jerney Alvarado.
Now we have a question from Costa Rica.
Años, las medidas de eficiencia
Throughout the years, energy efficiency actions have gotten lost because of solar panels. Yes, we get benefits, but users are not aware of the good use they should have. So how can we get better use of energy on renewables?
So Mr. De Buen and Mr. Barrios know very well that sometimes it's harder to explain energy efficiency than it is renewable energy. People can see a solar panel and they can understand that it's generating energy. With energy efficiency, it's energy you're not using. It's maybe invisible technology. It's harder to explain and engage people. But it's really important to remember that no matter where we're getting our energy from, the less we use and the more efficiently we use it, the better that is. Because even if solar panels are coming down in cost, and even if they can provide cheaper and cleaner energy, they still cost money to install, they still cost money to manufacture. And the more we can control the size of investment needed in our energy supply and in our distribution and transmission systems, the better economically for everybody. So energy efficiency becomes even more important in the context of renewable energy growth, because if we can make our societies twice as energy efficient, which we can, then it will have the necessary investment in supply side technologies, even though those supply side technologies are clean and less emitting and more affordable than they used to be. I think energy efficiency still remains central. And that combination of energy efficiency and renewables that so many countries are focusing on, it's the right combination that's really important.
Muy bien, voy a responder la de México.
Okay, now I will ask a question coming from Mexico, relating to some standards in Mexico and how we're going to make them binding. Well, those are mandatory, actually. Those are mandatory standards for building, and we are working with them because they have to do with landing and building of public offices, and for some, you need to work with the Federal Commission of Electricity. So we are 5 minutes past 11. Maybe we can have 2 more questions for Brian, and that would be it. Okay, so we have 2 more questions. The first is from Maria Ortiz. Which lesson can we learn from Spain so that we do not affect energy costs for the public?
So,
yeah,
please.
Okay, so you'll be aware that in many parts of Europe at the moment, energy prices are high, and this is causing some concern. The IEA is very clear to say that while we see some people linking those energy prices to clean energy policies, it is very much our view that we do not think energy prices going up is connected to clean energy policies. There are so many factors here in Europe at the moment related to it being a cold winter, questions of storage, a number of plants being offline. It's a very complex and multidimensional issue right now. It's very much our view that the way to address energy prices, particularly in the medium and long term, and to reduce such volatility, is for a stronger focus on clean energy policies, which will improve resilience, lower costs over time. So I think that we very much call on governments to keep their focus on clean energy and recognize that volatility does happen. There will never be a time when energy markets have no volatility, but we very much think that the lessons of the present tell us that clean energy should remain our focus.
Bien, gracias, Brian. Otra pregunta de Daniel Basurto, y esta la entiendo en una perspectiva global.
Another question which comes from a global perspective, which is the point of view that we need to take to look for energy efficiency when policies and policymakers are not aligned and we don't have the funding and everything goes backwards.
I think that every country in the world, Odon, as you know, faces this challenge because energy efficiency is complex. It involves many government departments. It requires funding from many sources. There is no simple answer to this question. It's a perpetual challenge in the energy efficiency field, but it's one of the reasons why we emphasize collecting data and sharing data as to the benefits of energy efficiency, because as you've seen today in some of our discussion, we can really emphasize how many jobs energy efficiency creates, how it can reduce energy bills, make energy more affordable, make societies more resilient. And if we can help governments and citizens remember all those benefits from energy efficiency, we can maybe help have a stronger focus in policy and in society on energy efficiency, and that's very much our goal.
Ya, yo contestaría que precisamente los beneficios de la...
I would also say that energy efficiency actions are cross-sectional and related to different aspects of public policies. So it really impacts many different aspects, many if they're not coordinated or directly coordinated. So that's why I was referring to some specific aspects of Mexican policies. So that's what I had to say. Anna, I don't know what's next. Thank you very much. Thank you, Engineer Odon de Buen, for moderating the Q&A session. It was a great one. And thank you as well, Brian, for your participation. Thank you to Sener, to Conue, to all the collaboration. Thank you, Brian, for such a great presentation. And thank you to everyone from the agency, Paola, for organizing this webinar. And thank you to everyone who was here today. We still have more than 190 people connected. We had more than 290 people throughout the webinar from Mexico and all Latin America. We had people from Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Uruguay, and many other countries, such as Germany, Austria, Denmark, Spain, the United States, France, Japan, Poland, and the UK. So thank you all. We remind you that our recording will be available in our website. Thank you again and have a great rest of your day.
Adiós.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias. Feliz día del ahorro de la energía.
Thank
Hasta
you
luego.
and have a great energy saving day.